Thank you very much for joining this Australian Monitor Zonemix Scheduler training. My name is Ewan Brown, the General Manager for Australian Monitor, and I'm joined by Peter Cleary, Amber's Brand Manager for Australian Monitor, and also by Stuart Lund, part of our Technical Services team. I'm sorry to say Ewan Lund, sorry. Part of our Technical Services team, and both Peter and Ewan help the Australia and New Zealand markets. So diving straight into the Zonemix Scheduler. We will obviously go over the Zonemix Scheduler software and all of the facets of the software. Firstly, that includes task management. So the scheduler, there's a whole bunch of tasks, task groups and day groups in order to be scheduled into the Zonemix. So the very first thing that we'll do is show you how to create these tasks, which are then ultimately triggered by the scheduler. Once we've done the tasks in the scheduler, we'll do the basics of task scheduling, more into day scheduling. So that is more for school applications, for example, and if you have an entire day of fixed schedules, how to then edit schedules from the software, how you would then override the schedule if that is a requirement, and how to enable and disable the scheduling. So relatively basic on that front. We then go into a standalone scheduler application that is also an application to the main Zonemix software that allows end users changes to the scheduler without seeing all of the back-end audio setup, etc., that they could possibly break if they saw that. We're also going to show some of the control mechanisms that the scheduler can also influence. So that is things like general purpose inputs and outputs that are on the Zonemix 4 and 8 products, and how you would then trigger those from wall panels as well. So when we set up all of these tasks, the scheduler could trigger these tasks, but also the GPIO and the wall panels can do it as well. So ultimately, in terms of the control side, that is more of an additional way of triggering it above the scheduler that is inbuilt into the product. We'll then go into some advanced topics on how to use the task scheduler for doing zone presets. So that is different to global presets. This allows you to then trigger for one zone, make multiple volume changes, play a message, that type of thing, but specific to a zone, and that's using the task scheduler. And finally, into some developer information and then some resources at the end. So the very first thing to understand with the scheduler is that it's actually only one component of what is inside the Zonemix product. Ultimately, the main section is the task manager that sits within the product. So as I was mentioning before, you would come in and you would make single tasks. So that could be a volume change, it could be a message playback, but you're making those single tasks. You could then group them together to cascade different actions together. And you can also create day groups, which we'll go into later. But ultimately, these actions are triggered by the task manager. The scheduler is the one component that is basically using time, that it's saying at this time, task manager, please run this task, please run this set of groups of tasks. So the scheduler is there to say to the task manager to do something. And what I was mentioning before in terms of general purpose inputs and outputs, the Ethernet and RS-232 comms in the wall panels, these can also trigger the task manager to do tasks at any time that you choose based on these trigger points. So you've got the scheduler, the wall panels, the Ethernet, RS-232 and GPIO that can all trigger tasks within the system. And again, we'll show you that later and hopefully it becomes clear. So I'll now jump into the software and then walk you through how we're actually going to set this up. So I'll just disconnect so that you can actually see it from the start. So, sorry, one thing I didn't show there. This is the setup that I'm using in the room. This is one of our sales kits. So it consists of a Zonemix 4 that is put into this flight case, along with speakers, a paging station, and some wall panel controllers. So that's the basic setup of the system that I'm about to demonstrate to you. So I'm connecting over Ethernet, and we'll just jump straight into the software. So I'm not going to go into the core of the Zonemix software in terms of audio setup, etc. That's in other training. We're just going to dive straight into the scheduler. So when you first open the scheduler, you will get this help file. There's obviously a manual that is associated with the scheduler as well, but this is just a quick help for people. So this is the scheduler, and the very first thing that I want to highlight is that you need to make sure that the date and time are set up correctly. So somewhat obvious, but if you forget to do that, obviously nothing's going to work. So there is an option at the bottom in order to set the date and time within the system. So it is important that you set this up, and there's two mechanisms to do that. There is manually setting up the date and time. There is a real-time clock within the product, and that will keep the date and time running within the product. If you power cycle the product and turn it off in approximately 1 week's time, you need to reset it. That basically the internal power supply has died by that point. So if you're using manual setup, please keep the unit on and don't turn it off for long periods of time where you'll need to reset it. But by far and away, the preferred method is to use network time. That gives far more accuracy. The real-time clock will lose seconds, approximately 10 to 15 seconds a year from memory. So if you don't want to have any issues with the clock drifting, and if you're not commissioning the system that people can easily set the time, then please use network time and plug an Ethernet port in. So use network time, obviously set that up. And if you have daylight saving in your country, then you can set it up from here. So there's multiple options here in terms of some countries that have daylight savings. For example, if I went into the Australian one, you can add in all of the daylight savings time there for the next 25 years. So set up the time within the system, and then we're good to go, and turn the scheduler on. We then come into creating tasks. So this is the first thing that you need to do in order for the schedulers to actually do anything, that you would first of all come in and create a task. This has all of the actions that are shown in this drop-down menu of adjusting the volume, muting and unmuting sources, playing tones, so the embedded tone generator within the product you can trigger. You can also trigger messages from the SD card that a customer needs to plug into the front of the product, recalling global presets and triggering general purpose outputs. So those are all the actions that the scheduler can fire. So what we're going to do is give you a demonstration of a school application that will cover hopefully all applications as a good demonstration. So I'm going to come in and start to create tasks in here. The first one would be a morning bell. And then I'm going to come in and select messages. This is then showing the content of the SD card. And I've created these files. So I'm going to select the morning bell, come in, and then decide which are the zones that I'm going to connect to. The system that I am demonstrating at the moment is a Zonemix 4, which is why you have 4 zones. On a Zonemix 8, you would have the additional 5 to 8 zones to select here. You have additional features here if you want to play the full track length, or if you want to play a snippet of it. You don't need to modify the core source file. You can just have it modified based on these settings here of playing 10 seconds. Is it repeating the number of repeats? So especially for a bell, for example, that you could use that to then have multiple bell rings just based on the one message and not have to customize the bell itself. So once you've then set that up, I'm then going to create another task. And again, I'm just going to go through here and set up some tasks. So if I'm doing the afternoon bell, then create another task, lunch bell, and an end of day. Okay. So then come in. So within here as well, if you have files that you need to add to the SD card. You can, of course, take it out of the unit and put it into a computer, upload them, but also there is an upload file option here that you can directly add files to the SD card from your PC. And then if there's an order change you want to do here, just change the order. I'll pretend I made a deliberate mistake there in terms of the order. So now that we have those tasks set up, one of the ways that you can change this is you can create, I shouldn't say change, you can create task groups that allow you to then make more complex tasks that come together. Now, for this, it won't particularly make sense in terms of a school setup, but if I took all of these messages, added them to the group, I can then say, okay, when I trigger this task group, I'm then going to, first of all, do the morning bell, then immediately after, I would then play the end of day, but I'm going to put a delay of 5 seconds, a delay of 5 seconds here, a delay of 5 seconds, and then I'll change the order so that it makes sense. So you then have play the morning bell, wait 5 seconds, play the lunch bell, wait 5 seconds, play the afternoon bell, and then wait 5 seconds and play the end of day bell. Now, clearly for a school, that wouldn't make sense in terms of doing all of those, but for any other application, if you're cascading, changing a volume, then playing a message, then triggering a GPO, for example, you could then cascade these all together and trigger it just from the one task. This will become clear later, but if you have already created schedules that are based on the task group, one of the things you can do is come in and disable one of the tasks in the task group and not have to touch the scheduler. So for example, if you were doing every single day you're going to play this task group, but you then decide at a later date you don't want to do afternoon bells, instead of actually changing the scheduler and having to modify each of the days, you could come into the task group and then just disable the afternoon bell. And then that allows you to easily make changes without having to affect the whole scheduler. Then finally, there is a day group. So the day group is there predominantly for school applications or for something that has a very fixed structure in terms of how the tasks are run through the day. So if I'm coming in here and again adding in all of these tasks, but what it allows you to do in this view in the day group is to then set the date, sorry, not the date, set the time when this is going to operate throughout the day. This then allows you to then, when creating the task, create one task per day, and it has all of these tasks embedded in that. So it will become clearer once I actually create a task schedule. So just to repeat, I have 4 single tasks, I have 1 task group, and I have 1 day group. So now that all of the tasks have been created, so one thing I should actually also mention, when you're creating a task, you also have the ability to test that task. So if you're clicking the test, that would then play the bell from the Zonemix and allows you to make sure that the file structure is correct, that all of your lengths, etc., are what you want. So you can just use that test track in order to, test task in order to do that. So now that I've set up the tasks, it would then be, first of all, creating a task. So this could be a one-off, or it could just be a weekly schedule that you're doing for that single task. So if I'm coming in here, I'll then make this a single task. And then I'll say each day, come in, select the task, select the color of it. This is more if you're creating a whole lot of tasks that allows you to then see them visually. And for the moment, I'm just going to create 1 task so that you can see that. So I've created that. If I close, you're then seeing there's a task at 1:30 on that day. Most of the time, it's quite unlikely that you would be doing single tasks, but if you have in-service days in a school, for example, you may want to do a custom one-off like that. The majority of the time you're going to be doing recurring tasks. So if I'm again coming in here, calling this a recurring task, again, coming in and selecting this is a lunch bell. So I can then decide I now want to make it a recurring schedule. So this is some of the power of the Zonemix, that it has all of the capability of doing quite complex recursion in the tasks. So you can do weekly or monthly views, but I'll just stick to weekly for the moment. You're then setting the days that you want it to occur on and when you want it to end, or the number of occurrences. I'll deliberately put a no end date so that you can see how that works. So I come in and create that, and then you can immediately see all of the tasks that are then created. And again, that is then going to go on forever in terms of the schedule. And now that I've deliberately jumped ahead, when you're using the UI, you can then just click this button to jump straight back to today. It allows you to make modifications easily on today. So there are 3 views: the day view, the week view, and the month view, that you can then see. If you start to have lots of tasks on one day, you can then come into the day view and you can see in more detail when the tasks are being run on that day. So heading back to the month view, once we've then created these tasks, if you want to edit the task, you would then right click in order to get this menu to then edit the task, or you could select the task and then come up here and click this button in order to edit the task. So if I'm then coming and I wanted to edit this entire task schedule, I could then say I made a mistake. I don't want Sundays, I want Mondays, and then save that. You'll then see all of them are then modified. So that allows you to then make modifications to single tasks, to group tasks, and to day tasks by using this edit schedule. Now that we've shown how to create tasks and recurring tasks, I'll then go in and show you day groups. So there's basically 2 flows here, that if you don't want to just have this, basically running single tasks or task groups, you want to have the capability of running entire day schedules. So I'll remove all of these, sorry. So sorry, this has been left as part of some testing. And testing to see how many. Okay, so
does that mean you can't delete all schedules by selecting all schedules and say select deleted, delete selected?
correct, it's not. We'll say that that was deliberately done in order to make sure people don't delete everything easily. So within the day schedule, you're selecting a start date and an end date. Again, in a typical school application, you would think of that as a term time. But if it's not a school, you could equally then say, I don't want an end date to it. So that gives flexibility on both ends there. Once you've created the day schedule, you're then coming in and using this alternate view. And again, this will become clear once I've filled it out, but it basically replaces what I've shown you before in terms of the task scheduling. So if I'm coming in, I previously created that day group, and it allows me to then select it in these drop-down menus. So what I'm showing here is that we will have day schedule running Monday to Friday, and it will happen every single week from the start date to the end date. I'll deliberately actually pull this out a couple of months just so that we can see the effect of it. If you wanted a fortnightly schedule where week 2 was a different type of schedule, you could then come in and make that change here. But for the moment, just as an easy demo to begin with, when we click apply here, we'll then have this day group applied. So what you'll see is that it appears with a D1 key. And that, if I open up the schedule again, is this number 1 here. So it's just a visual indicator of which day group is associated with each day. But one additional point, when it was created Monday to Friday in the schedule, because I am on a Tuesday today, it did not create the Monday back in time. So that is not a bug in the system. You've obviously created it from today, and then moving forward, it's then populated. So that's why you're not seeing the Monday populated here, because we started on a Tuesday. But that gives you a view of every single day. We will play the schedule, which was created here. So at 8 a.m., 12, 6, etc., all of these would play. So if I come back, and I'll delete these. Actually, sorry, just while I'm here, that what I was doing was right-clicking, coming in and doing delete, but you get the option of, do you want to delete the specific occurrence, or do you want to delete the entire series? So again, that's very useful if it's a school application, or if it's on a weekend where you want to deliberately delete some of the schedules but keep everything else. You can do that using this delete this occurrence. But I've just deliberately deleted those so that we can see the day groups more easily here. So that has created them all the way through up until the end that was selected there. So that is one method of creating day groups. Another way of doing it is that we can actually come in, and depending on what a customer wants to do, they can come in and create task groups and then use delays like this in order to build up a similar type of task execution. So we're basically giving multiple ways of allowing you to create tasks so that it matches. If it's a school application, if it's a warehouse, if it's a RSL, a pub club, etc., you can do it whichever way suits you. So moving on to a key thing within the day schedule. If you are running the day schedule and you want to change it, it's how do you easily change it? For example, if it's a wet day, if it's an in-service day, again for a school application, you don't want to have to come in to the scheduler and make those changes. If it's 8 in the morning and your receptionist walks in, they don't want to have to go into the scheduler and make those types of changes. It would obviously be very laborious. So I'm going to show you the mechanisms of how you can easily override day groups in the system. So first of all, I'm just going to save this. And there are multiple ways that we can change the scheduler. Now, just realizing I'll need to create an override day. So if I come in here, and I'm going to say this is the override day. And I'll create one task that there's only a morning bell. So we'll change the color as well. So normally this is what we'd want, but in the override day, if it was a wet day, etc., we only want to play a morning bell. So again, I will save that. And then what I'm going to show you is the mechanisms to trigger that override day. That can be the GPIO, or it can be the wall panels, or you could do it over a network if you had another control system. So if I come in and close the scheduler, I'm then going to come in to the GPIO. Now, I won't go into the full details of this, but it's just to show a mechanism of how you trigger the override. So I'm going to come in and say, the scheduler today, I want to use the override day. So what that will mean is, if I trigger that general purpose input, the override day will action. And what I'm going to do is simulate the GPI triggering by making a toggle change there. And then I come back into the scheduler. And this is what you'll see. That you'll see today, an override day is actually active. So that's the mechanism that you would see within the scheduler, that today, instead of day group 1 running, we actually have this override day running. And if you wanted to terminate that, you could then click the remove override, or you could actually have another GPI that says to stop the override happening. You can also do that from a wall panel in exactly the same way that you can program a button on a wall panel and select the override day that you wish to trigger. So that's a way of affecting the scheduler without actually having to go in and make any program changes to it. Okay. And then in addition to the scheduler changes that you can do with the override day, again with the GPI or with a wall panel control, you can also change if it's turning the scheduler on and off. If I'm making that latched, that will actually allow the GPI to both turn it on and off depending on the state of the signal. So again, if I come back into the scheduler, you'll see a green color on the scheduler indicating that it's currently on, but I'll open it up, and again you can see the scheduler toggle here. If I'm deliberately disabling it, you'll see it reflected here, and then it's being turned back on because my general purpose input is actually triggering as well. So you have, from the wall panels or from the general purpose inputs, you can turn the scheduler on and off. So that would be another mechanism that if you were in a warehouse and today you didn't want the scheduler to be active, or you can just want to use one of those mechanisms in order to turn the scheduler off completely for that day. And one thing I didn't mention with the override day, that when that is triggered at midnight, it will automatically revert back to the day group for the next day. With the scheduler on and off, you would manually have to turn the system back on because you've chosen to turn it off. Excuse me. So that is the basics of the scheduler. And then into the general purpose inputs and outputs, that just some further options that you have within here, that you can have the override that I mentioned before, the ability to cancel the override, and typically that would be on a second button if you wanted to cancel that. And you can also run tasks from the general purpose inputs. So as I was mentioning before, the scheduler can trigger these obviously on an automated schedule, but you can at any point as an end user trigger the tasks independently using these general purpose inputs and outputs. I'll then show that in the wall panels as well. So we have 4 wall panels that are connected to the system. There's a WP10, a WP4R, a WP-Vol, and a Bluetooth. I'll use the WP10, and that's just programming one of the buttons, and these are the functions that are available. The ability to turn the scheduler on and off, to do the override days as we previously mentioned, and then to run the tasks directly from a button. So that again gives you that capability. The Zonemix also has network control from Ethernet or RS-232, and that leads us into the advanced section. This is where we can send commands to the unit from external control systems, and we can use specific commands that are sent to the Zonemix and that can do some of the functions that I've just shown you. So as an example, this would be a command that would allow us to enable and disable the scheduler. We can do override days and we can execute tasks. Now it's too in-depth for this presentation to go into the developer mode in detail, but I just want to make you aware that it has that capability of connecting to external control solutions. What you can do if you're going to connect it to these systems, there is a developer mode at the bottom here, and you can then make changes in the system, and it will actually show you the commands that are being shown. So specifically, if I clear that again and show you for the scheduler, you could then be coming in and doing enabling and disabling the scheduler, and you can see the command directly being printed in that debug menu. So that's there to facilitate people trying to do that type of integration with control solutions.
Do you have to be online to do that?
Yes, Peter is asking if I need to be online for that to get the reply. Yes, you do. If you're in offline mode on the software, you would see the command, but you wouldn't see the response because you're in offline mode. So to get the full experience, you would need to be connected. There are other resources that I'll go into in a moment, but one that I would like to highlight is that what I've demonstrated up until now is the Zonemix software, which includes all of the audio setup, etc. But there is a standalone scheduler software for the product as well. So I'll just open that now. So we have the control software, which is the full software, and then we have the standalone scheduler. Again, meant for your end user, a receptionist, etc., in order to make changes to the scheduler without seeing everything else. So if I disconnect, so you'll see this is the scheduler edition and this is the full control software. I'll now connect with the scheduler. And this is the view that they get. So they'll have some information around system information so that they can potentially report any issues back to an installer. They have the ability to modify the date and time, and that's predominantly there if there is any changes required to the manual time that they can make those changes. So the scheduler remains in sync. But everything that I mentioned before is available to them in the scheduler, that they can make changes to tasks, to groups, to day groups, and the underlying schedule and edit it, as I showed you before. Also, for further resources, there is a dedicated scheduler and general purpose input-output manual. So this is a subset of the full manual for the Zonemix, but goes into much greater detail in terms of how the full scheduler works and the whole flow of what I've just shown you in terms of task creation all the way through into schedulers. So that is available on our website, and it sits under the download section as you would expect on our website. So there is the scheduler manual that sits there. So that concludes the demonstration of the scheduler software. If there is any questions, then please send through in the chat and we'll be very happy to answer those. But for the moment, that concludes the Zonemix presentation on the scheduler.